Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? It's undeniable, at least I think it is, that the dice mechanics that a particular RPG uses have a profound impact upon how the game feels. And likewise, it's been my experience that our perception of those dice mechanics, our perception of what's actually happening, has just as profound of an impact upon the way the game experience feels than the actual mechanics do. It's also been my experience that very often, when something's not quite right, very often we're not quite sure what isn't right. And we kind of struggle to figure out, what do I need to fix? What needs to be different in order for me to have the experience that I want? And so I witnessed this the other day. I had a YouTube content creator suggested to me by the YouTube algorithm, and they had a series of videos looking at dice mechanics. They were looking at something that I've seen people look at over and over and over again, things I've looked at myself. And they had some really unusual perspectives about what was happening. And, they finally got to talking about what it is that they were really looking for. And so I found the entire thing pretty instructive. Now, I'm not going to name them because it's irrelevant and because I don't want this to seem like a personal attack. It really isn't. But it was really kind of unusual the way they looked at something. And specifically, what they were looking at was they were comparing a bunch of different dice mechanics, trying to replace one that they found problematic with other ones that might provide the same number spread, but maybe this would do the job better and give them what they were looking for better. And I want to preface this right off the bat with saying this is not a pro D20 video. This is not a pro linear dice roll video. It's not an anti-dice pool video or different way to roll dice video or bell curve video. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, I like various different kinds of dice mechanics. I'm just looking at what they were looking at and how they were choosing to view it. Now, what they were looking to do was replace D20 with another dice mechanic that would give them a feel that they liked better. And specifically, what they were looking for was they were looking for something that would take away the randomness of the game. They didn't want to use a luck die. They wanted something where the choices they made were going to be more profound, where the fate of their character wasn't going to be in the hands of some random number generator. It was going to be based upon what the player did and the character's skill and all that kind of thing. And so what they were doing is they were looking at various dice mechanics, and they were looking at from the standpoint of a +5 modifier. And so they looked at things like D20 and then replaced that with 2D10 and 3D6 and 5D4. And it was really kind of interesting how they interpreted what was going on. Essentially, they looked at the percentage of time that this modifier would push them over the edge, and now their character was going to be successful, whereas beforehand they wouldn't have been successful with these lower numerical rolls until they were pushed over the edge by this modifier. And they looked at a bunch of different target numbers, and they prefaced the entire series, or one of the videos of the series, talking about the idea, they wanted to look at the percentage of time that the dice were in control of their fate versus the percentage of time that the character's skill was in control of their fate. I had to stop the video there for a second and compose myself a little bit and think about it for a second. But the answer is the fate of your character is in the hands of the dice 100% of the time, regardless of what mechanic you're using. The fate of your character is also in the hands of their skill 100% of the time, regardless of what dice system you're using, and any situational modifiers, whatever else you want to talk about, whatever influences the dice in terms of like what's the final target number based upon modifiers and all that sort of thing. Those things are always in play. But they chose to look at, once again, they chose to look at the results they were getting on these dice. And so the 5 numerical values which were now pushed over the edge, where now the character succeeded, well, they're looking at that, and then in various dice combinations, they were looking for 50%, greater than 50% of the time, where the fate of their character, they determined now, because the modifier pushed them over the edge, was now completely, taken away from the dice. And this was in their hands and in the skill, in the hands of the skill of their characters. The dice no longer had any control over the success or failure at that point. And the rest of the time, when the character would have failed no matter what, or when the character would have succeeded no matter what, based upon the unmodified roll that was on the die, well, this they were interpreting as, here's where the fate of my character is in control of the dice. It was a very odd way to look at things. I understand what they meant. I understand what they were saying or trying to say was, I want the modifiers to be extraordinarily powerful. But the more modifiers and the more dice systems they looked at, they kept on coming away with this idea, well, it's 50% is not good enough, 60% of the time is not good enough, 75% of the time that the modifier, would have pushed them over the edge wasn't good enough. It just seemed like too much like a coin toss. And the more they talked about the idea that if their character had made all the right decisions, then they should succeed. If they hadn't made the right decisions, if the situation was very dire, then they shouldn't succeed. The random number generator shouldn't be involved at all. There should simply be success or failure based upon what the character did, what the circumstances were, what would logically happen. There's nothing wrong with wanting that to be the case. But the flaw I saw in the approach and in the thinking was the dice mechanic has nothing to do with that. Replacing one dice mechanic with another dice mechanic, looking for the end result, which in this case turned to be that, ended up being like, if there's, enough skill, if there's enough things I've done, if I've gotten the right MacGuffins, whatever happens to be the character succeed, this shouldn't be in the hands of luck. It doesn't matter what dice pool system or die you roll at this point. If you want a 75% chance of success on a D100, obviously, you've got to roll 75 or less. D20, it's got to be a 6. 2D10, it's got to be a 9. 3D6, it's got to be a 9. 5D4, it's got to be an 11. 2D6, it's got to be a 6. All these are roughly 75% chances. If you want a 90% chance of success, almost a sure thing, but it's not a sure thing. On a D100, obviously you've got to roll a 90 or less. D20, you've got to roll a 3 or higher. 2D10, 6 or higher. 3D6, 7 or higher. 5D4, 10 or higher. 2D6, 4 or higher. The numbers, the other numbers, whichever number you get on these dice, as long as it's that number or greater, or in the D20, D100, that number or less, what number it is in that spread, as long as it's a binary pass or fail system, which is what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about gradations of success or failure. They're all luck dice. Really doesn't matter. Looking to change the dice system in order to get that feel that they wanted, that wasn't what they were after. They were after a diceless system. They were after something based entirely upon the decisions they made. There's nothing wrong with that. But very often I find that people look to systems and they'll call them swingy, or they'll call them unpredictable, or this is based on luck. And, you can replace it with different systems. And we're talking about binary pass fail. We're not talking about anything else that models competence and, in terms of, degrees of success or failure. Strictly binary pass or fail. What you want to do is, alter the target number. That'll alter your chance of success. 90% chance of success is 90% no matter what. Whether it's 4 on 2D6, or 7 on 3D6, or 3 on D20, doesn't matter. 90 is 90. So it was really, really interesting to me, how at the end of the day, perception, our views of what we think is going on, can be so profound, can really affect the way we look at what's happening, in the games, the way we're looking at the probabilities, and people are really bad at judging probabilities. But also the way we're looking at the way the game feels. And very often we're trying to fix the wrong thing, or we're blaming the wrong thing for the experience not being what we wanted it to be. What do you think about that?